And here we are going to squeeze with my queen, jack, jack 10. Against a button RFI, I think that's totally fine. I wouldn't squeeze this hand if you would open raise from early position, for example, or MP even. We flop top pair, 7, 8, 9. A gutter, backdoor flush draw. We're very deep against him. Good bet and then stack off versus him. I don't think checking my hand plays that great, really. So I am going to bet. Might even want to pot here, actually. Yeah, this is not great. This is definitely not great. What should we do here? Also don't have any time bank anymore. Hey everyone, what's up? And welcome back to my very first YouTube video here of 2021. In today's episode, we're going to jump into some pot Limit Omaha, of course, with 2 tables of fast forward on Party Poker. But before we're going to play some poker, of course, Happy New Year to all of you. I wish all of you a great year ahead of you with a lot of happiness and that all your dreams may become true. Of course, it's been a rough year last year, 2020, with the COVID. A lot of restrictions, a lot of things happening around the world. But of course, us as poker players, we have the advantage of being capable of still playing a game that we enjoy. And that is also what we're going to do today. I'm going to fire up 2 tables and we're going to do some live playing here. So I'm going to play poker and right away give some commentary on it. Now, it's been a week, a little bit more that I played, so I'm a bit rusty. I got to get back into the flow a little bit. So I think then starting 2 tables of fast forward is a great way to do that. Now, I just played a couple of hands before the session or before the recording started, basically. And I actually doubled up on both tables just before I started the footage. So I want to share those 2 hands with you and then start playing some more pot Limit Omaha. So as you can see, we got 2 tables lined up. And on this table, actually, let me open up the replayer quickly. Here we go. Let's replay this hand. So I was literally, I think this was the first hand that I played actually. So we got a limper in on the button, basically the small blind completes and we sit in the big blind with 8, 6, 6, 5 single suited. We check. We don't raise it up, of course, with this hand. We're playing multi-way pot here. And yeah, let's see a flop. And the flop is Jack 7 for 2-toned 2 hearts. We got a flush draw and a wrap. We got a pair of 6s. So we actually have a very strong hand when you think of all the outs that we have. But we are, of course, multi-way. We are at the bottom of the straight end. Basically, we don't have like 10, 9, 8, for example, which would be the upper end of the straight on this board. But we still have a very strong draw, especially also given that we have a flush draw. Obviously, the flush draw is non-nutted. We have a low flush draw here and multi-way. We should be careful then. Anyway, we got the small blind who bets out on the flop a little bit over 2/3 pot here. And we have a decision to make. We can definitely call here. I think that's totally fine. But I think there's also reason to raise here, especially given that we can push out some equity that the button can have. Like if we call, the button gets great odds to continue play a pot in position and can basically call with all higher flush draws than us. But if I raise, we can put him in like a pretty difficult spot with like a queen high flush draw, for example, with like a 10 high flush draw, like all those hands that do dominate us when it comes to the flush draws, we can push them out. So I think raising, there's also something to be said. If we raise and the small blind comes over the top, we get an easy call. We could even get it in, but I think calling using position is totally fine then. So I actually like to raise it up here. I think both are fine. Calling is definitely okay. I did decide to raise it up here. And surprisingly, the button actually comes in for the cold call here, which he shouldn't do too often, of course. Like he faces a bet and a raise. And he did limp pre-flop, so his range is pretty weak. if he calls, like, he will have very often a higher flush draw than myself, in my opinion. Just given the fact that, like, he's unlikely to have a very strong hand, because then he will just get the money in, or at least raise. A bear straight draw, it's also pretty unlikely, given that he faces his bet and a raise in front of him on a dynamic texture. So straight draws, it's possible. Like, people do crazy things, of course, at PLO 50, but I put him more often on a flush draw here. Anyway, the small blind now comes over the top again, and at this point we have a decision. We can raise, we can get it in here, or we can call. I decided to call here. It's a little bit of an awkward spot, really, because if we call, then the button gets also decent odds to call, and it's very likely that one of them will have a higher flush draw than myself, so that's not too great. So maybe even getting it in here would be okay. We're flipping against a strong mate hand, for example, Jack-Jack or 7-7. We're maybe even a little bit ahead against some combos that my opponent could stack off with, but he will, of course, also have like some strong hands with a higher flush draw, and then we don't do that well. So I think calling here is fine. There's also a good chance that if we call, that the button might even fold like a 10 high flush, or a flush draw, or a queen high flush draw, maybe even a king high flush draw, because it's very likely that his flush draw will be dominated. Now, given that I have a wrap in addition to my flush draw, I don't think folding is anything reasonable here, so I did decide to call. The button folds. The turn is the 9 of hearts, and my opponent now checks. At this point, it's pretty interesting. Like, we don't block any of the pairs on the board. So if we bet, we could get value from Jack-Jack, from 7-7, from Jack-7. There's a little bit protection, of course, against a pairing river. So there is something to be said for betting, but it's also fairly likely that my opponent can still have like a flush draw that is ahead of me, that he's now checking, just given the fact that he check raises, and he will have a lot of Jack-Jack and 7-7 in his range, and therefore on some of the hearts he will do quite a bit of checking, I think. I did decide to check back here. I think that's totally fine. The river is the king of clubs. My opponent checks again, and at this point I'm fairly confident that I do have the best hand. I just don't see people being that tricky enough often here after this run out with a higher flush than myself. So I think he would have bet those hands on the river very often. He checks, we get the money in at this point, and my opponent calls down with Jack-Jack. So that was a nice double up in the first hand, really. And let's see the other hand also, because we do have a second hand where we also double up. Let me see if I can find it here. Where is it really? Oh, here. It's actually the last hand. Okay, so here we go. Let's see, it is in here. Okay. So here we sit on ace, king, king 10, single suited to the ace, very strong hand in the big blind. We got 2 limpers, which happens a lot at these stakes. So don't be surprised if you see anything like that. We get the small blind raising it up here. He can do this with a bunch of hands, obviously, who will have sometimes aces, but there are like a lot of hands in this range that he can actually value raise here for sure out of position. Like, you shouldn't ISO raise too often here, because it's unlikely that you get a lot of folds, really. So he will end up at least out of position versus 2 players very, very often, and therefore he should do this with like a selective group of hands. But still, he can raise it up here with like 15% of hands, 10%, anywhere between 10 and 20%, I think, is reasonable here. Against that range, we obviously do very well with ace, king, king 10, single suited to the ace, so I raise it up here. Now the button does come in for the cold call here, which is kind of surprising, but again, people will call a lot of hands here. Small blind calls also, and we flop very strong here. We have top pair, the nut flush draw, and the nut gutter. It's a great board for my range, of course. Think about the hands that I would 3-bet pre-flop here against the ISO raiser. A lot of those hands will connect to this board texture. They can be aces, of course, but I will also have some like double suited high rundowns. I will have some ace X with the nut flush draw. I will have some combo draws, straight draw plus flush draw here. So I will do a lot or a decent amount of betting, of course, on a board actually like this. Now the small blind checks, which he should do with probably his entire range. And we have a decision. We can either pot bet here, put a lot of pressure on our opponent. We have top pair with the nut flush draw here as mentioned. We can bet large, but I think betting small is actually much better here because we want to get value from hands that we heavily dominate. So hands like the king high flush draw, the jack high flush draw, like straight draws with like a queen, for example, those are the hands that we want to get value from because we already block all the so many strong hands or so many strong draws that if we bet large, those hands will simply just fold. But if we bet small, like we will force some of those hands to continue. So I do decide to bet small, $7 here, a little bit under 1/3 pot. I think that's fine. The button folds and the small blind now actually comes in for the call. The turn is a blank, the 4 of diamonds. The small blind checks again, and we can either check back here or just get it in. And I think it's a great card to just get it in. We are still ahead against the majority of my opponent's calling range on the flop. And if he is being ahead of us at this point, I think we have still enough additional components to justify stacking off, of course. So I do pot, my opponent calls, and we river actually a straight here. And my opponent did show up with ace 10, 7, 5. He had top pair, and that's it really. So we were actually ahead on the flop and on the turn when the money went in there. So I think my opponent pre-flop raising is okay. He can also just flat there. I wouldn't really matter if he would flat pre-flop just because his fold equity is pretty low pre-flop and he's going to be out of position in a very high SPR against cutoff and button. So I think flatting pre-flop is fine, but the raising is probably the standard there. So I think it's fine. Against my 3-bet, calling is okay, although the hand is still pretty disconnected, but I think calling is still fine. I actually think on the flop, when he faces a bet, I think he should actually fold this hand. Like, he doesn't have anything going on. He's basically dead against my value range. If I have ace queen plus or ace x with a flush draw, like he has very little equity there. And his hand just performs pretty poorly after calling. Like, it's hard to realize his equity, and he's behind so often that I just would have liked to see a fold from him on the flop, even against my small bet. Anyway, he does call, and on the turn, we get the money in, and we take down a nice pot. Okay, let's get that out of the way and start playing some poker here. So I'm gonna play 2 tables here. We're playing on Party Poker as mentioned. I did play here a little bit, but not that much lately, really. And as mentioned, I'm a bit rusty. So forgive me if I make some mistakes or need some additional time to think about it. This is a clear fold. Like in the small blind, you want to be very tight and selective with the hands that you want to cold call with. This hand I would defend if you would open raise. Here we are going to fold. So yeah, the fast forward / Russian cash / Zoom, whatever side you're playing on, basically, I think it's a great format to get a little bit back into the flow of playing poker. There's not much distraction really besides just playing and putting in some hands there. This one we're going to fold. Here we're also folding. Yeah, let me know what you guys are playing these days. Are you also in the fast forward pools or playing more regular tables? This is definitely a fold. Yeah, so 2021, of course, a new year. Definitely excited for that. Like, this could be one of those flats. We're deep out of position. So we could definitely 3-bet, of course. But our hand doesn't play as great, I would say, in a high SPR situation. So I think both flatting and 3-betting here is okay. On an A-side texture, we're going to start with a check here. We have the nut flush blocker, kind of interesting. And on the turn, think I'm actually going to bet here. Yeah, going for the bet. Trying to fold out ace X, basically. Let's see what he is doing. He does fold, which is nice. So yeah, a lot of things are going to happen, of course, in 2021. We're working hard on new content in the PLO Mastermind. We are working on software, which I might get some content about also in the future here on YouTube. And here we check back flop and turn. We got a pair of nines. Pretty close. Folding this one here. If he folds, I would call his limp. So we get a good price, but now I'm just going to fold. It is now Sunday or Saturday afternoon, actually. And there are now 36 entries in the pool, which is not too bad. But there have been days for sure here on Party where it was more busy, basically, in these pools. I would 3-bet this hand if I get the chance to. And we're flopping middle set with the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. Pretty nice hand. Gonna start betting. Good turn. We unblock still Jack X. We unblock the flush draws. We pick up additional equity. So I will bet again, even though the straight comes in there. We get check raised. And I think I'm gonna call. That's a good river, I would say. Unless he pots, I'm not sure then, but I mean, we are going to bet. And we get called by a straight, nice. This is also pretty interesting, like my opponent bets flop and now double barrels turn. I think I'm actually gonna raise here. Although the board is very dynamic. I'm gonna call again. Yeah, it's tough. Like he bets flop and turn. Like because the board is so dynamic on the turn, I'm not sure if I do want to bluff raise actually there. We're gonna check now. Yeah, not sure about this hand. I'm gonna save that one for sure. Just to look into that. He wouldn't have folded for sure against the bluff raise on the turn. Here we flop bottom pair and a gutter. I'm gonna check without like a spade, without diamonds. And I do think I want to bet here, actually. And we get called by a better straight, okay. Saving up a hand. Screenshotting. And here we are going to squeeze with my queen, jack, jack 10. Against a button RFI, I think that's totally fine. I wouldn't squeeze this hand if you would open raise from early position, for example, or MP even. We flop top pair. 7, 8, 9. A gutter backdoor flush draw. We're very deep against him. Good bet and then stack off versus him. I don't think checking my hand plays that great, really. So I am going to bet. Might even want to pot here, actually. Yeah, this is not great. This is definitely not great. What should we do here? Also don't have any time bank anymore. Ay. Okay, guys. This is a short time bank here on party. Gotta get used to that a little bit. Let's hope if we can see that hand at some point. I think potting might be much better there, but I can't find the hand anymore. Not too great. Here we are going to call. We do see the hand now. Check back. Sit out here and we're calling down. Gonna replay the hand here for a second. First this one. Sorry for the mess, maybe. Flop very strong, top pair, flush draw, gut shot. A lot of blockers to my opponent's continuing range, but we unblock like queens, jacks, or queens and kings. So therefore, I actually do like to bet. Okay, so here we have this one. So what is happening? So we got a raise, we squeeze. Flop is queen, 7, 8. He checks. On this board, I think we should bet with a reasonable frequency, but not very high. Like we will squeeze with aces, kings, some double suited rundowns, and some aces and kings will totally miss here that cannot bet. So we will check. But frequency wise, we might be able to bet like 40%, 50% or so, I would say. And this one with the pair in my hand, I think betting is okay. Just because it doesn't play as great if I check and let's say he bets and he calls. Like, what are we really going to do? If he bets large, I don't know. It's just tough. But this is sort of the worst scenario, I think. Like, he bets and he raises. And now we're running out of time. We don't have the time bank, which is kind of annoying. In hindsight, I think we probably want to stack off here, actually. We invested quite a bit of money now. So we might just want to get it in, but I'm not sure. Like, it just doesn't sound that great, really. And we're facing a wrap here. And we're facing the nut flush draw. Yep. So we would have won the first one. And we would have lost the second one if we would get it in. Interesting hand. Definitely worth looking into at some point. So I'm going to save this one also. I'm definitely saving up some hands for study sessions, etc. So we're going to continue. Time banks is definitely one of the worst things in my opinion here on party. Let me know what you would have done in that hand. Whether you think it's a bet on the flop or a check. Checking. We are pretty short. With the pair in my hand, I'm gonna raise actually, just because my hand doesn't play great as a check call. Out of position, you want to check raise. A little bit more aggressive with some of those hands that sometimes feel intuitive to call. But just because your hand is medium strong, it doesn't always mean that you shouldn't raise. We're gonna open raise this one if we get the chance to, which we are. And let's see if the big blind is going to defend. In the meantime, here we did open raise and we get a cold caller. We flop top 2 pair. Get 1 diamond in our or 1 heart in my hand. Generally, we want to go and bet here with quite a high frequency on A-side boards. This one is definitely one of those hands that we could also just check because we are definitely in the middle of our range. Like here, we do have a very strong hand, but on the other hand, like we're not really pushing too much equity if the money would go in here. So the money does go in, of course, against aces, and we are dominated pretty heavily on this flop. We're gonna run it 1 time, apparently. And we're gonna lose. Folding this one, I think. Yeah, so we are, or I am, as well as other coaches of the PLO Mastermind. We're doing quite a bit of these play and explains also in the Mastermind, but there we go much deeper into the content. Basically, we're also using solvers and softwares to analyze spots more in depth. Because that is where a lot of the learning part comes from, of course. Like here, we do want to squeeze 3-bet. And we flop top pair and a low flush draw. SPR is 2.5. Let's start with a bet. We will do quite a bit of betting on this board. My opponent calls. I think I'm going for a check now. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Should we do anything then calling? Like the price is so good. We are going for a call. Now check again. I think if he shoves, like we are going to lose like super often here. Even though we have the jack, like I just don't think like what hands is he calling the flop with and then betting turn and river that are weaker than mine? Like how many bluffs is he really going to find there? It's very likely that he has like a 6, a boat actually, in my opinion. Like the small bet on the turn, you can easily have 6-5, 6x. Like he will check back also a decent amount of flush draws on the turn. The price is pretty good though. But I still think I'm... Yeah, it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird. Wow. I didn't expect that hand to see, really. Didn't expect that one, for sure. And here we are going to start with I bet. Pretty dry board. And here we will check, actually. We don't pick up additional equity. Yeah, that hand, I'm not sure. It's pretty weird. Pretty weird. Going for the call here. Against this sizing, I don't think we can do anything else, really. Interesting river. We block ace deuce. We get the 6. But we're still ahead against Jack X, of course. In the meantime, we did squeeze here. And we're going to pot against a shorty. And also see what the other guy had here. And he had... oh. Yeah, my opponent did had Jack X with an open ender there. So here he was holding Jack X with a wrap on the turn. I think his turn bet, not sure about his sizing on the turn really. Top 2 pair here with a spade. We're gonna call if he bets. And even against this sizing, I will call. It's pretty unusual that people start using this sizing on the flop. He's continuously betting. I don't see much reason to raise here, really. We could raise, but it's, yeah, just gonna call. Really nice card, actually, for me. Making it less likely I get a boat, of course. I'm gonna size up a little bit. And what did he have? Oh, he folded. He folded. Sorry. Pretty bad board for my hand and medium for my range. Short of. I will have some hands that connect very strongly here, but so does the cutoff. Check, check, and we take it down. Likely against kings, I would say. He did have a decent hand to maybe do something with, actually. So he was holding king jack 8-7, an open ender, bottom pair. Definitely a hand he could bet. And I'm gonna sit out here. Next blinds on both tables. We're gonna go for a check here, like we're 4-way. Want to be careful there, of course. Actually gonna sit out the next hand. We do have 9x here, and all my opponents did check. Like, is this time to bluff here? I don't know, like 4-way. I mean, actually, I think betting is okay. Like, we also have the 10, really. I wouldn't have minded a bet, really. Now, against a small bet, I'm just going to fold it, actually. Okay, that's going to wrap it up, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. We got some interesting hands for sure. If you have some comments about any of them, let me know below the video, of course. Happy to jump in there. I'm going to do a couple more of these, most likely. Especially if you give me a thumbs up for the video. If you enjoy this content, make sure to do so. And also subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you would like to see, of course. We are starting the year strong here. We're going to play a lot of poker, making some volume here and also some content here for YouTube. So let me know what you would like to see, if you enjoy these formats or if you want to see some more breakdowns, some more theoretical videos, videos for low stakes players. Just let me know what you guys are willing to see here or wanting to see. And yeah, that being said, Happy New Year again. Have a great day. And I hope to see all of you soon, either here in the comment section or on our Discord channel. And the link for that is also below the video. Take care. Bye-bye. See you soon. Over and out.